Hello and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the podcast that doses you up on everything you need to know about the day ahead in British politics in under 20 minutes.
You make politics sound like an illness, Jack. I mean, maybe an addiction. But anyway, good morning.
Definitely an illness.
Good morning. It's Wednesday, the 4th of September. And we're back with the early morning podcasts that help you unpick, decode, understand and explain what politicians are doing and why. But today, that means pausing politics as normal as we receive and digest the final report into the fire on July the 14th, 2017, in a West London tower block, Grenfell Tower, that cost the lives of 72 people.
Yeah, this fire was over 7 years ago, Sam, and after multiple delays, we are finally getting the big inquiry report today. We will find out whether it cuts through the web of blame, gives the survivors and the families of those who died the answers they're looking for. It's going to be a big moment in politics, and the cut and thrust of politics will stop as we get to that moment. So my name is Jack Blanchard from Politico. With me in some other distant corner of southeast London is Sam Coates from Sky News. No sign of Bob the cat, I'm happy to say this morning. Sam, let's hope it's all quiet on the Western Front today.
I've just separated them. Now, before we get on with the day and get into that report and everything else that's going on, I just wanted to flag we've got a new innovation. We sort of want to turn the podcast on its head and give you the opportunity to ask us some questions about how we do things, why we do things, what's going on in politics. What do you want to know?
Yeah, exactly. You can ask us anything you like. You've got to leave us a voice note. We will answer it on the podcast. They've given us a phone number and we can answer questions about stories, about politics, or indeed about Bob the cat. You can WhatsApp us the voice notes on 07511 86 76 33. That is our very own special Jack and Sam's number, so send your messages to that.
I've always wanted to pretend I was on Going Live when I was a kid, so I'm
going
to do the number as well. It's 07511 86 76 33.
Now you've sort of got to sing it like a jingle, Sam. Sort of, you know, like
we'll get a choir.
075. Okay,
right.
Three things. Grenfell is the big main thing today. It is going to dominate all of the discourse after the report is published at 11 a.m. for the rest of the day, and probably a lot of tomorrow and the rest of the week as well. But there are other things happening today. Of course, it is Wednesday, so PMQs, the first PMQs of the autumn term. We'll see Keir Starmer against the occasional leader of the opposition, Rishi Sunak. And speaking of the Tories, it is a big day for the Tory leadership contest because the first knockout round, it's like the sort of third round of the FA Cup today. The first of the 6 contenders will be knocked out as Tory MPs start to vote on who they want to lead the party. But honestly, none of that is going to cut through to the evening news bulletin, given the Grenfell inquiry report will be published at 11 a.m. It's going to be a big moment. There are a bunch of journalists who've been locked in with the report, reading it ahead of that. And when the embargo lifts at 11 a.m, your phone, my phone, and everyone's phones in the nation are going to ping with news notifications about what was in the report.
So this is the consequences, the long-running consequences of a fire in a kitchen in the early hours of the 14th of June, which, by the way, was just a couple of days after a spectacular general election in which Theresa May had just lost her majority. So the sense of political paralysis, as you saw on that early morning from all parts of London, that incredible tower block on fire, was incredibly vivid. And the political mess has continued to surround this issue to today. That fire spread rapidly around the building, engulfing it in flames in as little as 3 hours. And what we have today is the second and final report from an inquiry that is essentially designed to try and work out where blame should properly be put and where and how changes should be made to the way new and old buildings are managed and constructed in order to stop anything like this from happening again.
Yeah, there have been hundreds of hearings in this inquiry over the last few years, and those who've been watching them closely will know that it's sort of gone through a long and detailed history of fire regulation in this country, and I think that is going to be one of the main themes that people are talking about today, stretching all the way back to the sort of Thatcher era when deregulation started, looking at how governments regulate the building of and decisions made around tower blocks and the materials that are used, something which seemed quite dry and probably not very interesting and newsworthy all through those years. But we have had a series of deregulation drives by different governments, including David Cameron's government in the 2010s, when the way that we regulate how buildings are built were changed, and in some cases watered down or stripped back. And we used to talk about bonfire of regulations and less red tape and all that sort of stuff. But of course, in some cases, Sam, red tape is a pejorative term for very important regulations that keep us safe. And I think from a political point of view, one of the really interesting topics of conversation today is going to be, how did collective or successive governments get it so wrong that a building like this was allowed to be built using the materials that we used with the results that we all saw?
Successive housing ministers, successive secretaries of state, I think are going to be reading the report very closely to find out whether they are apportioned blame. One individual named in the Telegraph who could come under some fire is Eric Pickles, Lord Pickles. He's a former community secretary when David Cameron was Prime Minister. The Telegraph suggests that he faces questions over whether or not he pushed through necessary regulations. I think he mounts an argument that he was told that they weren't a priority and that the government was in the middle of a deregulation drive, as you say. So I think there is political consequence. But I just want to take a step back, and there are 2 or 3 questions that I think everybody is going to be asking about the report and the aftermath that Keir Starmer is going to stand up in Parliament and tell us about the government response to straight after Prime Minister's questions. The first is, if the report is clear on where blame lies, is anybody prosecuted? There are currently some 58 people and 19 firms and organisations that are under investigation by the Metropolitan Police and Criminal Crown Prosecution Service. But it seems as if charges of anybody are still years and years away. And some people are saying that people are unlikely to be charged or tried for until at least 10 years after the disaster. So that would be 2027. There are 180 investigators working on this case. So obviously, this is not a criminal prosecution that we get today. It might, some of the findings might feed into that, but I'm not convinced that the sense of justice being done will be felt by victims at the end of today.
No, this is still very much the start of that process, if indeed that happens at all. But there will be lots of focus on the politicians. There will be lots of focus on key firms involved, the firms involved in the cladding and construction and refurbishment of this building, and indeed on the actions of the London Fire Brigade as well, which have been criticised in some quarters, the way that they dealt with it. So there's going to be an element, I suspect, Sam, of blame game today, of finger pointing. In terms of the sort of logistics of how the day pans out, the embargo lifts on the report at 11 a.m. And so at that point, we will read reports. You'll be able to read the full report on the website. The inquiry's chair will make a statement on camera at 11. And then we'll see Keir Starmer in the Commons at 12. I'd imagine he'll mention it at the start of PMQs, but the main debate, as you say, comes at 12:30, led by Keir Starmer. He will make a formal statement in the House of Commons giving the government's initial response to the report and its recommendations. Possibly he'll accept them in full, possibly he won't. And then there'll be a long debate in the House of Commons this afternoon with MPs asking questions and making statements and probably very impassioned speeches about this issue. And then the debate will play out on our airwaves through the rest of the day. I'm sure it'll still be leading bulletins as well tomorrow. It's in some ways it's a non-political story, but the truth is it's going to get very political very, very quickly.
I think it's going to be another example, a bit like the Post Office and contaminated blood, of the collective failure of our entire political system. How successive administrations of both stripes didn't do what was necessary and still haven't done what was necessary. There is extraordinary reporting by Sky this morning that I've just been reading. At least 3,280 buildings are known to still have unsafe cladding, and only 949 of them have started work on that cladding. Cladding being the material put around buildings that in some cases turned out to be flammable, and owners of flats that have unsafe cladding literally can't sell them because they can't, potential buyers can't get mortgages for them. It is extraordinary that here we are 7 years after the Grenfell fire, and there are still over 3,000 buildings with this material on the outside. And that is not something that I think you can pin on one Secretary of State, one government, but it does raise questions about whether we are dealing really any good at dealing with long-running systemic problems in our politics.
Should we move on to other less important matters? The Punch and Judy show that is PMQs comes back to town today. Although it's not much of a Punch and Judy show, is it, at the moment, with Rishi Sunak taking the part of one of the characters? He doesn't seem terribly punchy. Maybe he'll have come back from his Californian summer holiday feeling, up for the fight, and we'll get some more of the knockabout stuff that we know and love and indeed despise in this country. But I doubt it, especially given that the Grenfell thing is going to follow. PMQs, yeah, I feel like it's kind of an easy ride for Keir Starmer, isn't it, basically now, until the Tories finally pick a new leader. I mean, if he was suddenly up against Kemi Badenoch, I suspect that will be something, for example, that will be a much punchier exchange. But at the moment, I feel like he can sort of breeze through these meetings.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like Rishi Sunak particularly wants to land punches at the moment. He has avoided being dragged into the political debate. The one PMQs that we had before the summer, it felt like he pulled his punches. But nevertheless, I think they're inside Downing Street. They're all settling down to a routine to prepare for this to become quite a fight each week. I understand the Prime Minister does 4 hours prep a week, like his predecessors, in order to get ready for it. The prep for PMQs is a critical moment because it forces the Prime Minister to sort of work out what he thinks about a range of topics, and then actually quite a lot of governing and government happens in that. And that's part of a wider sense that Downing Street is sort of starting to calm down and get into a routine, with Keir Starmer attending an 8:30 meeting every morning, a 9 a.m. meeting making detailed decisions chaired by Pat McFadden. There's a quad that seems to meet with Angela Rayner and Pat McFadden and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves to make some critical decisions. It's not yet clear how important it is. All of this stuff is being sorted out as we speak in these few weeks, so that things like PMQs can run as smoothly as possible from Downing Street's point of view.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Like, PMQs gets a lot of flack, and to the outside observer, and indeed to many of us inside observers, it does look like a bit of a ridiculous farce sometimes, with questions being thrown at the PM, batting them back, bit of a show for the cameras. But it does force a Prime Minister to spend a few hours of the week getting in his head into gear about all the different things he might be asked about, working out what the government's answers are. He'll be given a load of lines. If they ask you about this, say this. Well, that's a chance for him to interrogate that and say, actually, no, I don't want to say that. That's not where we should be on this, because these are busy people, and it's a rare 4 hours of just pure focus on the government's position across a range of issues. And of course, there are a range of issues that are going to come up today. You would think the decision on Israel's the arms embargo or semi-embargo on Israeli arms will be discussed today. The winter fuel allowance decision, which we now learn is going to be voted upon in the House of Commons next week, and that could be a big moment for Keir Starmer that we'll talk about again. That could might come up from Keir Starmer's own backbenches, and it's often the unhelpful backbench questions which are the most interesting bit of PMQs, and there's other stuff kicking around as well. So even though the leader of the opposition may not be the punchiest, fightiest, well up for it leader of the opposition that we've ever seen, that doesn't mean it's a waste of time at all.
And I think you'll get from Keir Starmer a sense that he, of course, is going to stand firm on the winter fuel payment cut that Rachel Reeves announced just before the summer. But in order to try and quell some of the unhappiness on the backbenches, he's going to remind them that the triple lock on pensions is going to deliver a reasonably healthy uplift next year. And pensioners could be in line, I think it's in the region, if next week's inflation predictions are correct, for around £400 a year. So that's the state pension going up £400 a year this next week, which will go some way to mitigating the £200 to £300 that's going to be taken away from most pensioners as a result of this decision. So that kind of message he'll be hammering home. What he won't be saying is, I'm going to make any changes in order to make life easier, even for pensioners who just miss out because they just about don't qualify for continuing to get the payment.
Away from the House of Commons chamber, the other big action today will be in Committee Room 14, Sam, down committee corridor, not far from the chamber, where the Tory MPs will be filing in at 1:30 this afternoon to start voting for the first time on who they want to be the new leader of the opposition when Rishi Sunak finally departs the stage. One of the six will be kicked out of the contest, whoever gets the fewest votes today. So there'll be lots of activity down there, lots of journalists scurrying up and down that corridor. Of course, what we won't see is the familiar face of Graham Brady reading out the results, which how many of these leadership contests have we seen over the last few years? I've lost count. He's always been the one big figurehead, the sort of glue binding the Tories together as they splinter apart again and again. He's gone now. He's stepped down, of course.
Putting the final touches to his book, which is out in a couple of weeks.
Right, and everyone's looking forward to reading that because there's a guy who really knows where all the bodies are buried in the Tory party. So instead we have the less familiar face of Bob Blackman. His successor will be reading out the results. That'll be on camera from one of those grand committee rooms in Parliament, and we will learn who exactly of the six is going to be the first to drop out of the contest.
For days, people have speculated. People like you, Jack, have speculated that it'll be Mel Stride who's out first.
Sorry, Mel.
In today's contest. It's a bit of a mug's game. Somebody was saying last night you could see some figures giving Mel a sympathy vote, games being played in order to eliminate figures like Priti Patel, who might pose more of a threat. So you could never be absolutely sure. We might, at the end of today, get a very strong sense of who the two figures are who are going to go forward to the membership ballot at the other side of party conference in October. But really, we'll learn a lot from the numbers. We'll be told how many of the 121 Tory votes each candidate got. And then from there, we'll try and divine as much as we can. And we might be able to tell a lot. Or given the game-playing nature of this particular selectorate, it might actually remain still quite opaque what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there'll be as much interest in the numbers at the top of the draw, if you like, as the number of the lowest one and who goes out. Does Kemi get more than Robert? Does Robert get more than Kemi? But of course, it only matters so much because there's many more knockouts to come, and where the votes of the people who are knocked out go is really almost as important as how far ahead you are at this very early stage. So it's still a very hard contest to read. I am making no predictions whatsoever. It is indeed a mug's game, but there'll be lots of interest in it this afternoon in Westminster, if not in the wider country.
Somebody said that if Mel Stride goes out, you would probably, in the next round of voting, which is next week, see Kemi Badenoch get a bigger share of his votes distributed to her. If Priti Patel goes out, which is less likely, then you could see a bigger boost next week to Robert Jenrick. Are those two going to be the two front runners, or will one contender from the One Nation wing, so that's Tom Tugendhat or James Cleverly, get a look in? We will have a better sense of that. At the end of the day, one person involved in one of the campaigns was saying that while they assume that Mel Stride goes out today, the more important thing is that they see the numbers, but because it's all about Tory MPs, and I quote, then people really will play games. And what's been interesting, I was talking to one veteran of these contests last night, and they were saying none of the different campaigns have been particularly good nailing down, closing the deal with individual MPs. They don't get a solid commitment. They've been a bit more wishy-washy. So you'll see lists of support floating around the internet, but the ballots are private. So don't assume that because a Tory MP has said they're going to vote one way, they end up actually doing that.
There you go. Tory MPs, still can't trust them as far as you can throw them. If you've got questions for me and Sam, you can WhatsApp us a voice note on 07511 867633. We will be back tomorrow morning for yet more politics. Everything you need to know in under 20 minutes. We will see you then.
See you then.